What is up, YouTube? That's here today. I'm super excited to be bringing you guys my very first team building guide for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet for both singles and doubles. Today we're going to be taking a look at sand teams, why I think they're the best team to use, why I think they're most beginner-friendly team to use, how you guys can use them, how you guys can beat them, basically everything you're going to want to know about learning all the buffs that Sandstorm teams got in this new format, as well as like how we can play them and how we can defeat them moving forward. We're going to be taking a look at all that stuff in this video. Before we get into it though, I just want to say thank you everyone for watching. If you guys want to see more team building guides like this, as well as ranked battle content, competitive content for both singles and doubles moving forward in Scarlet and Violet, think about dropping a sub. Other than that, you guys can also join our Discord too. There's a link to the Discord in the description. Tons of people battling, trading, doing all things Scarlet and Violet. We have an amazing community of people that want to play with other competitive players in the Discord. Think about checking that out. Before we get into actually talking about how to beat Sandstorm, all the new tools it got, which it got a ton moving into Scarlet and Violet, let's actually take a look at what Sandstorm does. Sandstorm, for those of you guys who don't know, creates a Sandstorm upon sending out a Pokemon with the Sandstream ability. So upon sending out like a Tyranitar or a Hippowdon, it's going to create a Sandstorm that lasts for 5 turns unless the user is holding a Smooth Rock. In that case, it would go for 8. And it's going to give a special defense boost to all rock-type only Pokemon. A lot of people think that Sandstorm boosted the special defense of steel types and ground types. It's not true. Only rock types get that special defense boost. But that's not the real reason that we use it. The real reason we use it is because at the end of every single turn, every Pokemon that is not a rock, ground, or steel type is going to take chip damage. It's going to be able to break sashes, going to be able to break multi-scales, and it's going to be really, really good for understanding what our opponent's items are. For example, in singles, if we can deal chip damage, we can see if they're holding leftovers, see if they're holding like different sort of berries and things like that, and it can be a lot easier for us to understand our opponent's sets based off the Sandstorm damage that we deal to those Pokemon. Another really cool thing that Sandstorm does is it allows us to use Pokemon with the Sand Rush ability. The Sand Rush ability is going to be featured on a bunch of the Pokemon here. Let's take a look at Lycanroc, a Pokemon we already know is confirmed, and it gets Sand Rush. So Sand Rush says doubles the ability bearer's speed during a Sandstorm. Really, really good ability, and so by pairing a Sandstorm user like Hippowdon or Tyranitar with these Sand Rush users, we have the ability to hit super hard and bulky with our mons like Tyranitar and Hippowdon, but also hard and fast to be able to take out the threats to Pokemon that would potentially threaten our Tyranitar and Hippowdon. And again, I want to let you guys know, I'm talking generally about singles and doubles. Sandstorm is the perfect team to play if you want to get into competitive Pokemon because you can basically take the same team into both of those formats and actually still get a lot of work done. So let's go back to Tyranitar and talk just a little bit about why I think Tyranitar is going to be a really, really good Pokemon. I think in general, Tyranitar is probably the better Sandstorm setter out of him and Hippowdon. I know a lot of OG singles players are going to say Hippowdon's so good in Battle Stadium singles. It gets Yawn, it gets Stealth Rocks, Whirlwind, all that good stuff. Hippowdon's great. It doesn't get the boost from the Sandstorm like Tyranitar does to its special defense stat, but Hippowdon is very, very bulky. It is returning. Very, very strong Pokemon. You're not going to have a problem going with Hippowdon. I would say, though, Hippowdon is a little bit reactive in doubles. For example, if I were to lead like Tyranitar and Lycanroc in doubles, and my opponent were to lead like Hippowdon and other things like that, I'd be able to take advantage of how slow, and more so, it's that Hippowdon doesn't really have that many like attack increasing moves. One, Intimidate, and Hippowdon's turned off. Versus like Tyranitar gets access to things like Taunt. It has a really, really good stat line, huge attack, can Dragon Dance. It can be built special if you want to build special as well. Tyranitar just has a ton of really, really cool tools, and I would highly recommend using Tyranitar on all Sandstorm teams, or even just splashing a Tyranitar onto a team that's not even using Sandstorm, because you can use it to take away the effectiveness of other weather, like, you know, sun teams or rain teams. Tyranitar is going to be absolutely amazing going into Scarlet and Violet. But, you know, let's take a look at, there's also this T-Tar, right? It doesn't have the Sandstorm ability. This is the Paradox T-Tar. It has Quark Drive, but it's a rock electric type. So if you can actually set a Sandstorm, it will get that special defense boost. So just be on the lookout for this guy because this is also going to be really popular. But let's start talking about some of the actual tools that Sand teams have gotten in this gen. I think the biggest change is that we get access to whatever the heck this thing's name is. Ghost Dog. Is this a Greavard? Houndstone. Houndstone is the name of this Pokemon. It's the evolution of that Greavard thing, but you can see it gets Sand Rush as its basic ability. And the really, really cool thing about this is it's a ghost type. A lot of the Pokemon that are going to be on these sand teams are like rock and steel types, so they have a big weakness to fighting. So having this Pokemon just in your team preview means your opponent can't just lock in big fighting attack mons. They have to expect you to maybe hard switch this thing in, block those attacks with its ghost typing, and also in doubles, for example, this thing's going to be so good because if I were to lead Tyranitar on this thing, Tyranitar would activate its Sand Rush, double its speed. You'd be able to avoid fake outs with this thing, and that's so important. So, like, for example, you're going to see a lot of teams that go Tyranitar Greavard, And if their opponent leads with like fake out leads, which are going to be very popular, you can Terra Ghost with your T-Tar and have 2 mons that are unavailable to be fake outed really, really early on the first turn. It's going to be so good. That's one tip you guys can take to the bank going into Scarlet and Violet. It has good stat line too. This speed stat right here is going to double into being a respectable number. Good attack, good defense, and what I really like about this guy is it gets a bunch of unique moves. Roar is good for phasing out Trick Room users, and again, you can't fake out this guy. You can also go for like really, really fast Charms, Helping Hands. We don't know that much about its egg moves yet, so I hope that it can get after you, kind of like Stoutland. Stoutland used to after you T-Tar back in the day, after your teammate. But in singles, like look at this, like Play Rough, Crunch, Roar, Charm. Last Respects is another really, really good move that gets stronger and stronger as more of your teammates get KO'd. This is another very, very good one. But it also gets like the Elemental Fangs. It gets Snarl, which is huge in doubles. So this Pokemon is going to be really, really good. It also gets Body Press and Wisp, right? These are ridiculous. It gets Trick, it gets Helping Hand. It also gets like obviously Terra Blast and stuff like that. But this Pokemon is going to be so good. You can use this thing with Body Press with that 100 base defense to check your opponent's T-Tars. You can just throw one of these Houndstones on your team to check other Sandstorm teams. And this Pokemon is going to be so good. I would highly recommend adding one of these to your team or catching one, or if you're looking for things to breed early on in Scarlet and Violet, think about using one of these. It's going to be very, very, very good. The next thing I want to take a look at is this thing. What is this thing called? I know what they look like, but I don't know all their names. Kilowattrel. This is a new electric flying bird, but it gets some really good abilities. It gets Volt Absorb, Wind Power. Wind Power increases its boosts the power of the next electric type move used when hit by a wind move, which is okay, but competitive is what we want. Now the reason we want competitive, if you take a look at a lot of the Sandstorm mons, they're very susceptible to Intimidate. Intimidate lowers the attack of both opposing Pokemon in doubles. This Pokemon's going to be a lot better in doubles than it is in singles, but basically, you want competitive on your team because a lot of people are going to be stacking those Arcanines and all the big Intimidate users in the format to take apart your T-Tars, your Hippowdons, your Houndstones. I'm going to get this thing's name wrong forever. Houndstone, yeah. There's so many big physical attackers that they need to use Intimidate to basically lower those stats. So this guy being on the team can somewhat protect your Intimidate users from being intimidated by getting a +2 boost to its special attack. Let's go over what competitive does for everyone that doesn't really know yet. Competitive raises the ability by your special attack by 2 stages when hit by a stat lowering move. So if it soaks the Intimidate along with your teammate, you get a +2 boost to your special attack. And this guy has good special attack. 105, higher than Flygon. Good Pokemon. 125 base speed, that's really good. That's like primo good. This guy gets a bunch of really, really cool stuff. You can build it physical special, gets Volt Switch, gets Discharge, gets Hurricane, gets Electro Ball. It also gets access to, obviously, like Thunder Waves. It gets Tailwind as a TM in this game. Very, very important. So this is our Tailwind setter. So what we can do a lot of the times is we're not going to be 100% reliant on only our Sand mode and our Sand Rush to go fast. We can go for like, we can lead like Houndstone and this bird, right? And we can go like Protect Houndstone, expecting them to nuke it, because it's really, really important to get Houndstone off the board to turn off the Sand Rush, because that's how the team works. We go for a Tailwind in the next turn, hard switch out this thing for T-Tar, and now we have like a +4, we have a doubled speed stat. So we can actually even outspeed other Sandstorm teams this way. Really, really cool tech, and this Pokemon's going to be great. Gets Thunder, gets Big Terra Blast. You're going to see a lot of this thing everywhere, but I guarantee you early, this Pokemon will be big, humongous on Sandstorm teams. So be on the lookout for this thing. Also, the fact that it gets Discharge, like I was talking about, there's a lot of ground types. You can pair this thing very well with Hippowdon and a couple other ground types, kind of like this thing. The new Tentacruel form. The new Tentacruel form is a ground grass type Pokemon. Its ability here makes it so status moves go last, but are not affected by the opponent's ability. The reason why you might want to use this thing in your games, though, because it is a ground type, it can be paired very well with this Electric Bird thing that gets Discharged, able to hit both Mons. It also gets access to a really, really good stat line. This is a great stat line. 100 base speed, people always sleep on how fast Tentacruels are. Good Spadef, can be used physical or special. Good Mon. I would say mostly special. It's more of a support Mon. But it gets Spore. This is the new Spore user in this gen. So yes, this Spore does go last, but Spore going last isn't always a bad thing. We've talked about that a lot on this channel. Being able to soak some damage and then Spore after the attack means they haven't even started their sleep turns yet. So think about using this thing in your own games. I would definitely say if you can pick one of these up, add to your team. This is going to be great on the ladder. This is one of those Pokemon that people aren't really going to have the calcs for. Yes, it does have a 4x weakness to Ice, but you can add some Steel types to your team to be able to cover up for that. You can also Terra change this thing into another type as well. Very, very underrated Pokemon. I would highly recommend checking one of these out for your games. Up next, I want to take a look at this thing. What is this? Bombirdier. I think this thing's actually going to be really, really cool. It gets access to things like Big Pex and Kenai, but what we're looking at is going to be Rocky Payload. It powers up rock-type moves. So it's a dark flying, and what I really like about this thing is the dark. That means it's unaffected by Prankster mons. Prankster users using things like Taunt, Prankster users using all sorts of like Thunder Waves and other things like that. Grimmsnarl is going to be a really good Prankster user in doubles. This is mostly looking at doubles for this, but it's still going to be good in singles. This is going to be a great choice item mon in singles, and in doubles, it's going to be, again, probably another Tailwind user. Let's see if it gets it. It gets Taunt, which I really like. It gets Stealth Rocks and Tailwind. That's huge. Not many Mons actually get those moves in combination. It gets access to U-Turn. It gets access to Icy Wind. That's really, really cool. It gets things like Sucker Punch, Roost, Power Trip, Feather Dance, Parting Shot. Parting Shot, like one of the best moves like ever invented for any situation. Very, very good. And then we also have all these rock moves. So it gets like 3 stabs, and it has a good stat line. It's probably going to be built mostly as physical, but I like this thing a lot. I'd probably build it with like, I don't actually know yet if that ability would make it so it doesn't lose its sash in a Sandstorms. Otherwise, you would sash it, but like Life Orb with this thing is going to be great. I think just Scarf sets on this thing are going to be great. You can Scarf Parting Shot, you can Scarf Rock Slide, you can go for like Scarf Dual Wing Beat, Scarf U-Turns, all those sort of things. You're going to see a decent amount of this Pokemon on Sandstorm teams. I know I'm going to be using a bit of it. So just be on the lookout for this thing and respect its speed tier. If it's outspeeding things it shouldn't, that means it's Scarf, which means you can take advantage of it. But I do think this thing will see a decent amount of play, and I'm pretty excited to use it, so definitely be on the lookout for it. Up next, remember how I was talking about how a lot of the Mons on Sandstorm teams are things like Tyranitar, things that are all the weaknesses to things on Sandstorm teams, like things like T-Tar, Lycanroc, those are all basically weak to big physical attacks. So steel attacks, fighting attacks, ground attacks, those are usually things like Earthquake, Bullet Punches, close combats, all those big physical attacks. This Pokemon's actually going to be a really, really good defensive pivot to, set Sandstorm with T-Tar early. It's going to be more in singles than doubles, but it will still work. And you can pivot to this thing to block a lot of those type of attacks, mostly the fighting ones. But this thing has well-baked body. I really like this. Immune to fire-type moves, so that's good if you're trying to get a steel type out of the way, and defense is sharply boosted. So if you can think of like, this is basically like a better version of the evolution of Lulu, right? Much better version. And it has a great speed stat of 95. That's really good. It's being able to speed tie Arcanine. 115 base defense before our sharply boost. And if you scroll all the way down, you see it gets a bunch of really cool moves. These are all really, really good support moves. And it gets access to the Golden Body Press. So this is another one of those mons you can actually tech into your own games to beat Sandstorm teams. If you're really afraid of T-Tars, really afraid of all of the Lycanrocs and stuff like that, they're going to be coming with the Sandstorms. Throw this thing on your team and just roll them over. Big body press, huge base defense on this thing. You're going to see a lot of this Pokemon, I think, just because Sandstorm's going to be so popular, and this is a great Pokemon to throw onto teams to give your teams a little bit more of a defensive pivot, most singles and doubles, and then being able to repin those Sandstorm setters. So really, really underrated mon here. I would highly recommend you guys try this Pokemon out as well. And, I only want to talk about these last two. These last two aren't as important, but I do think it's really important to talk about the value of ghost types in Sandstorm. We've talked a little bit about how I think Skeledirge is going to be very, very underrated on Sandstorm teams. I personally am going to play this thing Scarfed. I think that sounds very, very unique, but it has just enough speed to work with Scarf. And you can use this thing to switch in to cover up for a big weakness to fighting attacks, big weakness to steel attacks. Yes, it does still share the big weakness to ground that T-Tar does, but this is a good defensive pivot, and then you repin a lot of those mons that pin the T-Tar in the first place after using a Scarf set. So I think something like this could definitely see play. I know I'm going to use it. One of my favorite cores back in Gen 5 was like T-Tar, Excadrill, Chandelure. Their defensive typings go together so well. You can pivot really well and then repin with aggressive speed tearings on a Scarf Ghost type. Very, very solid. And I'm going to try it a lot. And again, the last thing I really wanted to talk about was Lycanroc. We showed a little bit of Lycanroc earlier. A lot of people are probably going to be using Houndstone, but that doesn't mean that Lycanroc's bad, because Lycanroc is the faster version. It is probably going to get moves that can hit the Houndstone. You see there's a bunch of dark here. So like if we can EV train this thing, or maybe like Life Orb Crunch on the Sand Rush version of Lycanroc, and that can actually check Houndstones, that would be really, really good. I think Houndstone, the one thing about it is a lot of people are like, Houndstone's going to have to be Sash, but then the Sash will get broken by Sandstorm. One cool thing about Sand Rush is it doesn't say it, but if you have Sand Rush, even if you're not a rock, ground, or steel type, you will not take Sandstorm damage. That's why I was wondering maybe if like this bird, the same thing with Rocky Payload, it would work if it still didn't take Sandstorm damage. Houndstone is not going to take Sandstorm damage. Hopefully this doesn't as well. But yeah, Lycanroc's going to be a great Pokemon that is going to be probably the OG players go to, but I really think Houndstone's going to be good, and I really hope that this little list gave you a bunch of tips for how you can make Sandstorm better. I think realistically adding a T-Tar, a Sand Rush user, maybe Intimidate Mon, maybe a good defensive pivot like this thing, maybe like a Tailwind user, and then like one big special attacker to round out that Sandstorm team. You could also even make a really aggressive Sandstorm team that uses 1 to 2 setters, like using T-Tar and Hippowdon, and then use 2 Sand Rush users in both singles or doubles to really drive home that you want to win in like 3 to 4 turns. And through potentially tearing more defensively or offensively, you might be able to actually close out a game before your opponent even knows what's happening. So if that's an attractive playstyle to you, think about using these Sandstorm teams, think about giving it a shot, and think about letting me know if you like this sort of content or if you want me to go a lot more analytical, breaking down EVs and stuff like that. I can definitely do those type of team building guides, but I wanted to get a video out today just to show my thoughts on some of the new Pokemon and my thoughts on how Sandstorm is going to work going into Scarlet and Violet. So thank you guys so much for watching. Think about joining the Discord. Again, link in the description. And other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.